take projection.
It's Wednesday morning, and you know what that means. It's time for an early episode of the Alabama Slam podcast. I'm your host, Corey Hanna.
What's going on, guys? It's Patrick Akers.
And we have a jam-packed show today. We're going a little early to get out before the Thanksgiving holiday. We'll both be off this week, obviously, spending time with the families. And there's a lot of stuff to cover. We're going to get into Full Gear first, and then we want to run down our predictions for the upcoming Premier live event?
Yeah, premium live event.
Premium live event from WWE.
Yeah.
So Survivor Series, War Games. But first, let's get into Full Gear, and we're gonna start with Moxley and MJF, and then we'll go back and circle back through the other 74 matches that took place that night. So Moxley versus MJF. At the very end of a long night. Turned out about the way we expected in terms of who won. Neither one of us predicted the ending right. Shout out to Chase Gilmer. He called it on Twitter, which is a thing that I'd considered the Nux, but I forgot to bring him up that day. So he gets all the credit on this one. He said that's probably how it goes down, and he was right. So, I'm not sure that it's the right angle.
So, I guess the overarching theme of this pay-per-view is it felt like a hard reset from everything that's come by, all the all-out stuff, the Punk stuff, everything. This match going into Full Gear, or this pay-per-view into Full Gear this is a reset for 2023. These are the people that we're going to usher in with a new year, basically, and help try to take AEW to new heights. Listen, does MJF work as a heel? Sure, he's a great heel.
Yeah, of course.
I just don't know if this is the right way to use him now. Only because Jon Moxley was the biggest star in that company. And as soon as his music hit Saturday night, he got booed out of the building. He worked as a heel, Moxley did in this match. MJF worked as a babyface, selling the knee, having the Hope comeback spots. And I get that it's in his backyard in New Jersey, and so it's his home turf, but MJF has been getting cheered everywhere, right? He got cheered when he came back in Chicago. Remember, if you'll go back to All Out, he comes back and CM Punk standing in the middle of the ring with the title, and the whole crowd is chanting MJF. So my hesitation here, I'm going to withhold all the judgment until we see what happens with it. Because can they pull this off? Absolutely. But like I said, I think last week, the degree of difficulty is harder going this way.
Yeah, for them to cheer a full-out heel the way they do every week.
Well, now you have to explain the relationship between William Regal and MJF. Now you have to explain what happens with the Blackpool Combat Club. Are they still going to be the Blackpool Combat Club? Fucking Regal was the only reason why they were called the Blackpool Combat Club. You got to explain that whole thing. You have to then go back and put a bow on this thing with MJF and the Firm, which has been happening. Which now you have two heel groups, essentially, with the Firm. So how do you go about that? So I'll wait before I cast final judgment on what this thing is, but to me, now going forward, how many baby faces do we think can go up against MJF and get a pure babyface reaction? Because it can't be Jon Moxley because he already got booed out of the building.
Right.
Ricky Starks? Maybe. I'm not convinced that Ricky at this point with his character and the way that they've booked him is going to get a full babyface reaction against MJF.
Right, because what we figured the move was going to be was MJF face turn. He'll turn around and go against Ethan Page, and the winner is coming because Ethan Page kind of looks like he's set to win the Eliminator tournament unless they now flip it and put it on Ricky and let Ricky go up against MJF in a few weeks.
But that's in a 2-week build. You want to do Ricky Starks and MJF in a 2-week build to just have MJF beat him?
Yeah, it doesn't. Yeah, I don't know.
Like, you can't put Wardlow up against MJF because Wardlow is going to get absolutely eviscerated on the microphone.
Right.
Like that. This is the problem now, is that with having MJF be this heel, you have to run people up against him that can match him in his strengths, which is the ability to talk on the microphone.
Yeah.
And MJF, if he's going to be a heel, he can't do all this stuff like have the catchphrase of generational talent that he says in a way which makes the crowd want to do it with him, right? He can't be motorboating fans when he comes down to the ring and making people laugh. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
He has to, if he's going to do that stuff, he's got to do those stuff as a babyface, or we actually need to see the devil, and it has to get vicious and evil. And we have to start seeing him and Regal run through the locker room in such a way where it makes you a little bit uncomfortable, to where you can be like, okay, this is a little, it's not fun anymore to cheer for him. Right now it's fun to cheer for MJF, right?
Yeah.
You got to make it in a way where it's not. And I'm just not convinced. Like I said, maybe they'll pull it off. I'm just not convinced that a show that we have seen creatively have as many ups and downs as what it's had, to the point to where people show up and they disappear with no explanation, or storylines go unwrapped up for months at a time, that they're going to be able to walk this tightrope that's needed to book MJF the way he is as a champion. Maybe I'm wrong. I just...
Yeah, because your prediction is they'll keep this on him until his contract is up.
Well, you have to, right? That's the story. If the whole thing is the bidding war of 2024, I don't know how you... He has to have the title to have the leverage.
Yeah.
Or else it doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
Which is why you give it to him now. My whole thinking was, and I said it last week, that he's a babyface now, and the closer we get to 2024, the more he amps up the WWE, I'm leaving, I'm taking this title with me, the more he starts talking down to Tony Khan, and then he naturally becomes a heel that way.
Yeah, because, he had played up, he had been teasing the face turn, and then said, he was saying that he would win this the right way without cheating, and then, of course, he used the Nux, and then he went sort of scorched earth in the quote-unquote media scrum, which was pretty funny.
Right, and that's what we talked about, I think, yesterday off the podcast, was like, even in that media scrum where he's delivering that promo, where he's running down all the media and he's running down Tony Khan, the things from Twitter were not like, oh, this dude's a piece of shit. The captions on Twitter were, oh my God, this dude is amazing. He's a generational talent. Like, you can't... The AEW fan base, like we've talked about so many times, is such a hardcore fan base that the only thing they're really responding to is good professional wrestling. So when you give them good professional wrestling, you are going to get cheered.
Right.
And that's what he does. So it's going to be really interesting to see what happens in the next couple months. Because to me, if there's one guy that can get MJF to be booed, it's Eddie Kingston. Do you want to do that right now?
Nah, you got to build to that.
That's what I'm saying. So now we have months at a time now. The television ratings are already down. There aren't a lot of hot baby faces. I guess maybe you could, rehab a Bryan Danielson and run him up against MJF. Maybe. I mean, that would be my choice, I would guess now.
Yeah, because he already made a comment, MJF did yesterday when it came out, that Danielson was talking about when his contract is up, he'll retire from full-time wrestling and maybe just do part-time or whatever. And
yeah.
So MJF already kind of commented on that. So
maybe we see that.
There.
I mean, still, though, Bryan Danielson, the way he is.
I mean, you could run an MJF and Kingston something pretty soon, like in a few months, and then maybe come back to it late in the year or something, just as a Eddie's redemption, whatever. I don't know. Who knows? But do you want to put that all out there right now?
Because now if you have MJF and like we think he's going to hold the title until the beginning of 2024, you got a year to build somebody up. whoever you want to take it off of him. And it doesn't need to be somebody who's already had it before. I don't think it necessarily needs to be a guy who's coming from another place. Like MJF is a star, and so the way that you then take the title off of him is you, much like he did with Wardlow, you turn that around to help build another star. But this is they're walking a fine line here, and I hope that they pull it off convincingly. But
yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens.
I hope in 4 months, but we don't go. This was probably a bad call, right?
Well, we've got 12 other matches to get to just from Full Gear. So
yeah, and in full AEW pay-per-view fashion, I actually fell asleep in the middle of it, and when I woke back up on my couch, MJF was walking out for his entrance. So I went back and had to watch some of this stuff. It's not. I mean, I get it. People are paying $50 for it, and so I guess Tony and AEW feel like they need to give as many reasons as possible for you to get it.
Yeah.
But like looking at the Full Gear card, and they only have 4 of them, right? But looking at the Full Gear card and all that, how it's taken up the entire top of your notebook in Survivor Series is like the bottom 3 lines.
Yeah.
It's it's just different.
Yeah.
It's a different way to go about things for sure.
Well, 3 of these matches are the 0 hour, and we don't have to spend a ton of time on all these. Like I said, we got a lot to run through.
Yeah, we'll run through them.
So first off, in the 0 hour, was Best Friends versus the Factory. And they'd kind of been teasing a little bit of a different angle from Danhausen, and they kept saying mystery opponent, and then it was like Excalibur and JR were just kind of laughing about it because they're like, "What's the mystery here? We know it's Danhausen."
Yep.
So that was a little different angle with him. It was different makeup, different music, different entrance, different ring gear, trying to present, I guess, his very evil side, right?
Yep. It's not going to work.
Yeah, it's I like Danhausen and I like what they're trying to do, but I don't know if it really works.
It won't work. Yeah. This is a misstep. He can do this stuff on the indies. He not to body shame people here, but this is professional wrestling. There is your appearance and how you're perceived is a big deal of it, right? Does he look like he could beat any of these guys on the roster?
Not from the Factory, for sure. Some of those dudes.
Like Nick Camarado looks like he would snap Danhausen in half, right? Like take all the spooky stuff out of it, right? The spooky stuff works with Malachi because Malachi is a legit level kickboxer,
right?
And
he's 6'5",
6'5", right? You know what I mean? Like, and AEW has too many of these serious spooky people.
Yeah.
That if Danhausen wanted to, debut the teeth stuff and all the other stuff that he had done on the indies and want to bring in AEW, you can still do that and have him be a comedic heel or a comedic act. But having this, now I'm out for blood and I'm serious. Okay, I'm not buying it. It won't work up against anybody else other than the Factory and these like job level.
Yeah, it seems to me like he might be trying to do it sort of like Finn Balor and the Demon, where it's like only every once in a while does the Demon show up, right? Like, because he teased like, he hears these voices or whatever he said that he was teasing last week.
Yeah, but again, Finn Balor came to WWE with the cachet of having a decades-long plus career in Japan.
Yeah,
where he kicked the shit out of people and was the leader of the Bullet Club, which is still going on to this day, right? Danhausen was doing a Pee Wee Herman dance. You know what I mean? And that's not to like be disrespectful. That would work in AEW if you just did more of that. This is not going to work.
Yeah. So next up was more of a real match that had some sort of consequences. We had Brian Cage versus Ricky Starks. 2 former tag team partners and Team FTW guys going at it. We've said it before. We're a Team Ricky podcast over here, so this went the way we wanted it to. Brian Cage came back kind of with a vengeance when he came back.
I'm loving this. Just like, hey Brian, here's a match against an agile dude, and we know that you're a hoss and you can do all this agile stuff too. So just go out there and just have some spots. The fucking Canadian destroyer spot into the spear. How many 300-pound dudes like Brian Cage can take those moves, right? Like, there's not many.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is great. It's a great use of Brian Cage, and obviously he looks like he's going to be more of a big time player in Ring of Honor when it finally starts up, because he's got Prince Nana and the Embassy in his corner. And then we know how we feel about Ricky Starks, so we'll see. It's Ricky Starks versus Ethan Page tomorrow night as we're recording this. I don't know. It could go either way. You could have Ethan Page win and go up against MJF at Winter is Coming and put the bow on the firm stuff. You could do Ricky Starks. I mean, he is a babyface, so if you're going to keep that babyface heel dynamic, it could be him too. I don't know if you want to, blow your wad with a Ricky versus MJF feud that lasts for 2 weeks, but
yeah, I don't know.
Stranger things have happened.
Unless this could be the start of a larger feud. I don't know. I mean,
yeah.
If that's the way you want to play it, like, put him up against a true face in a couple weeks.
Yeah, so we'll see, but yeah, this match it worked for what it needed to be.
Yeah, anytime we get a Ricky Starks win, I'm good with it. Next up, Eddie Kingston versus June
Akiyama.
I can never pronounce some of these dudes' names. This was a crazy one. I didn't know anything about the guys. Somebody that's just kind of gotten back into wrestling a few years ago. So, they gave us enough of the backstory with the package, the video package, to where it felt like there was some weight to this match, right? And then these guys get out there and just slap the shit out of each other for 15 minutes.
Just a straight, old school, All Japan, Kings Road style match that we know Eddie has been so influenced by.
Yeah.
And you could tell this meant a lot to him.
Yeah.
And not Eddie Kingston, the character. We're talking about Eddie Kingston, the person behind. It meant a lot to him.
Yeah, that's what my wife and son and I went to breakfast the next morning, and we're talking about it. She's asking us about the pay-per-view, and we're explaining some of the storylines and characters to her. She knows a couple of the people here and there from us talking about them, but I started telling her about this one. I got a little emotional, like talking about Eddie, how Eddie reacted after the match, and his show of respect towards June, and I don't know. You could tell it was really something to him, and that to me, after knowing what he's been through in the last few years and almost quitting wrestling and everything, I just thought it was amazing.
He's got a little Mick Foley, he's got a little Dusty Rhodes, he's got a little Terry Funk, all these like old school wrestling guys who didn't really fit the bill of like a premier athlete, but somehow has this connection with the fans that's really special. That's why I think if there's one dude that you run up against MJF, I mean, this is the guy.
Yeah, and he was getting chants and everything.
I think now 2023 is the year of how do we move Eddie from where he's at now to being one of the top 4 or 5 guys in this company that we can then have take the title off MJF. Because if you just think about an MJF versus Eddie Kingston feud, you already see what the promos look like. We know MJF, what does he hate? He fucking hates Japanese wrestling. He dog shits New Japan all the time. Eddie Kingston, if there's one like last bastion of old school Japanese style, it's him. So you can imagine the promos back and forth. You can imagine the zingers. They land on each other. Like, it would be really captivating television. The problem is we got to get there somehow. Yeah. And I don't know if we do it now. Now, it could be a thing where Eddie Kingston is the next challenger for MJF at the pay-per-view at Revolution. MJF and then Regal beat the shit out of Eddie Kingston so bad they write him off television for a couple months. And then, a la Dusty Rhodes style, he comes back with a vengeance, right, to take the title. You could do something like that.
They put Hard Times on Eddie Kingston.
You could this could be your version of Hard Times Eddie Kingston. He's got that kind of potential, I think. It's just, we will see where we come out of this. Yeah. But Eddie, this is also a reset for Eddie Kingston, right? He did the thing, obviously the fight with Sammy. They got him quietly suspended for a little bit. The rather odd story they tried to tell of him being like too aggressive and beating guys up after the bell and the rest coming out, all that weird shit that happened a couple months ago that we were just like, that kind of went nowhere. Turns out it actually did kind of go nowhere because we haven't really paid it off at all.
Yeah.
So now we got to reset for Kingston. Let's see if we can't elevate him into the main event level scene.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how it goes. And then he gets the mic. He says it's 6:54 with 20 seconds by the goddamn pay-per-view.
Yeah, which was great. Just use that. That should just be.
Yeah.
They should just run a little package during every pre-show for the pay-per-view.
Yeah.
And just have like a bunch of matches and just have Eddie saying to the camera like, it's 7:53 and 40 seconds. Order the goddamn pay-per-view.
Yeah, love it. Love it. So let's get into the real show. Let's get into the main show, Full Gear. Started out with a banger, Jungle Boy versus Luchasaurus. Not really the way I thought it would go. I mean, it went the way I wanted it to go, but I kind of felt like they were going to keep beating Jungle Boy down for a couple more months until, I mean, maybe Christian's closer to a return than what we thought. I thought he was going to be out a lot longer, so I thought they would keep just beating him down.
Yeah.
But still cage match to start off. I believe you said yesterday this was one of your favorites of the night, right?
This was my match of the night, yeah. I thought this gave such an old school cage match feel. One of the things I've always hated about cage matches is that like you can escape. We saw that in the Karrion Kross Drew McIntyre just a few weeks ago, right? That was how the finish of the match was. You got out. That's just kind of such horseshit to me because the whole point of a cage is that you can't get out. Like the two of you have to finish this inside the cage. And so even the creative way that they did in this match with Christian stealing the key, unlocking it, letting Luchasaurus go out and then get some weapons that they could bring into the cage and then have the referee close the cage back once they took Christian away. Such a smart move. And Jungle Boy sold his ass off here. Luchasaurus looked vicious. He looked like he was legitimately trying to kill Jungle Boy, Jack Perry, in this match.
Yeah, because he just kept hammering him into that fucking
and
fence.
Using the cage as a weapon, too. Like, a lot of people... Like, in a lot of cage matches, you'll hear the commentary be like, oh, you can use the cage as a weapon. A lot of people don't do it justice. This, I felt they actually did it justice with Luchasaurus literally just grabbing Jack and throwing him into the cage repeatedly.
Yeah.
Like, and Jungle Boy, Jack, this is what we wanted to see from him when this feud started, right? Was, does he have that fire, that intensity that would needed to be pulled out of him? And I think he showed it in this match. You got to remember, this was kind of a reset from their previous All Out, right? Where, you know, he had the match with Christian, but I guess Christian's tricep injury forced him to go about a different way, and so they pivoted to this probably, which not a bad call. And then, of course, you get the Shawn Michaels elbow drop from the top of the cage, which is just, to do that with one table and not two, because basically with an elbow drop, you can't actually land on your opponent, right? You have to land beside them.
Yeah.
But if there's only one table and you're on top of a cage, you basically just got to be like, well, my hip's just going to smash into this mat right now when I jump.
So the angle that they showed it from during the show, I mean, it looked rough, right? Mm-hmm. And then I saw yesterday, or maybe it was Sunday morning, I don't remember. I saw another angle where it was shot from Jungle Boy, Jack's side of the cage. And he's coming down, obviously, and like you said, there's no second table.
Yeah.
So, like, his elbow hits, right? And his whole body's still falling. And so his elbow kind of comes back up, and it looks this looks brutal on him, too. Like, it looks brutal on Luchasaurus, but then it looks fucking brutal on Jack.
Yeah.
Because, like, his body's still fucking moving.
Yeah, yeah. That's why you see a lot of guys with spots like that do two tables. So that the guy giving the move also has something to kind of break his fall. But this was great. Obviously, Jack gets the win. You know, Jungle Boy Jack Perry could be somebody that you run up against MJF. Again, the problem would be Jack is not well-spoken on the microphone.
He even said that in an interview last week.
And so you're going to have, there's a lot of guys that you could run up against MJF, but MJF is going to neuter them as baby faces because he's going to be so captivating in the promos.
Right.
That it's going to turn people on his side, unless he becomes diabolical in a kind of way.
Yeah, there was a thing, I guess Wednesday or Thursday, one of those days last week, where they were talking about him getting away from Jungle Boy, and he's using Jungle Boy Jack Perry, or he's using his real name, and he was somehow he initially didn't use that, but his name, because he's like, I just tried to not use the microphone, and I wanted the in-ring work to speak for itself, and he's like, and then I realized I needed to actually work on using a microphone.
Yeah, that's a big part of it, and that's probably the last step in his game, right?
Yeah.
We've gotten to see the more serious side of him, the more intense side of him. Now we know he can punch above his weight, so to speak, taking out bigger guys like Luchasaurus. Now the last step, if you're going to try to become a world champion, is can you talk that stuff on the mic? Yeah. That's the last piece. And if he can figure out a way to do that, then yeah, you could see him in the next couple of years have that AEW world title for sure.
Well, let's move on to the next match. We saw the return of the Elite versus the Death Triangle. The Elite got a huge pop. We knew they would. There was speculation, they were trying to trademark the Wayward Son's name, and when they showed the graphic of the TikTok, and it's like, carry on. I was like, okay, well, they're fixing to play this song, Carry On, My Wayward Son. And I thought that was a little cheesy. And then...
Yeah, I wasn't a big fan of that. I would have rather have heard their song.
Yeah. But then I did read yesterday that somebody thought it was kind of a dig at CM Punk, because there's the line in the song that says, "There'll be peace when you are gone."
Yeah.
Which could be true. I mean, that's a level of petty that, they paid a lot of money for that song, I'm sure, right?
Yeah.
And so they're going to use it once, maybe.
Oh yeah, sure. That won't be their entrance song.
Yeah. So it's funny. It's funny, and I don't know. You have to read a little more into those sort of things. But if that's the case, maybe they didn't do it, but it seems like they probably did, right?
So before we talk about match, let's talk about this. So the crowd had a very vocal "fuck CM Punk" chant.
Yeah.
Which not only did they show on Being the Elite, which made its return Monday, but also during the show, and the camera kind of cut away from it rather quickly, it looked like Matt and Nick were kind of egging it on, the chants. Is it a level of petty that they're going through? Sure, it could be. Do you think there's any possibility that this has now turned into a work, and at some point in the line, at some point down the road, we are going to see, Kenny Omega and the Bucks are going to be in the ring talking about something, and we hear Cult of Personality hit, and out walks CM Punk, and they turn this thing into a storyline and try to make money off of it?
I think the only way that he comes back and this works at this point, because they've removed him from the video game cover. Right. But it's funny, they remove him from the video game cover, and then yesterday on fucking Facebook, there's 2 or 3 different posts from the AEW store. They're like, look at these shirts. These are exclusive to live events.
Right.
Like you can, and it was like there's only one. There were a couple that were just regular shirts, and then there was one that was like exclusive to live events. I'm like, okay, so you take this man's off the cover of the video game,
right? And
then you're promoting his shirts. I mean, the only way it works for him to come back is he comes back. He's got a dressing room by himself somewhere on the other side of the building. He has like no interaction with anybody before the matches, after the matches. There's no situation where he can get involved in backstage bullshit, because by all accounts, he was nothing but trouble backstage.
Yeah. I mean, what we're talking about, I would put it probably a less than 1% chance of happening. you know?
Right.
And it could just be that the Young Bucks and Kenny are that petty, that they would egg on chants like that. And obviously Tony or whoever on the truck was like, hey, maybe we need to not show them doing that or whatever.
I mean, he did refer to them as young kids or whatever, right?
Sure. But we have to always keep in mind this is wrestling, and crazy things happen in wrestling all the time. People leave, they come back, You think the bridge is burnt and it actually wasn't, and people are welcomed back into good graces. I'm just saying, if we get a fucking Kenny Omega versus CM Punk match, you gonna tell me that there's a bigger match to be had in wrestling in the last 5 to 10 years than that match?
Then you could do the Punk and MJF team up.
I mean,
what's more heel than those two guys?
Based of all the stuff that has happened recently, I mean, really, when you're talking about potential big dream matches out there, and we might get one of them. We might get Roman Reigns versus The Rock. That would probably be number one. How is number two not Omega versus CM Punk, given everything that's happened?
Yeah, I don't know.
And you give those two guys a live microphone, and you say, hey, just, obviously, you got to stay within the confines of the story we're trying to tell, but say whatever you want. Like, come on. That would be some captivating television for sure.
Yeah. Well,
probably won't happen.
True.
But
that's a risk and a half.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that would be.
Are you willing to bring your whole goddamn company down?
But the heat, though. The heat.
Let's get into the match on this one. You tweeted out that this match was so good, Tony said, fuck it, let's run it back 6 more times.
Yeah, and I mean, you don't expect anything less from these guys, right? At this point, like, it is, we are spoiled. We've talked about this before, just the amount of crazy in-ring action that we get on a weekly basis from AEW. Like, I really do think we're going to look back at this 15, 20 years from now and talk about how special it was to be in the moment, and maybe we should have appreciated it more. Like, this was a bonkers 6-man tag.
Yeah, well, they made reference to this at one point, too, is that Kenny was gone for so long with his injury, he came back and only had a handful of matches, right? And then he was out for 2 or 3 more months on suspension. So his body is in, like, tip-top healed shape at this point.
There's nothing I really love more in wrestling than seeing Kenny hit that V trigger.
Yeah, it's brutal.
From different angles. And he's taking care of his opponent, because if you slow it down, he's actually not hitting him with his knee, he's hitting with his shin. But he's so quick with it, and he hits it from all these different angles. Yeah. I love finishers that you can hit from different angles and be unexpected, right? A choke slam is what it is, right? We've all seen a choke slam. There's no other way to do a choke slam that makes it interesting. Kenny can hit the V-trigger from the ripcord lariat part of it. He can hit it when just out of nowhere. He can hit you with it when you're jumping off the top rope. Like, he makes it all these things. And the way these guys put these matches together, and I'm talking about just the Young Bucks, the Lucha Brothers, Pac, Omega, just the spots and how the spots lead into each other. And then how they escalate into bigger spots. And then, of course, like at the end, I think I had Death Triangle winning it, because I was just like, I don't think you bring the Elite back and just have them immediately beat Death Triangle. And turns out, not only is that what they're going to do, but they're going to do this 6 more times.
Yeah.
Because ain't nobody winning this thing in 4 matches, right? No. The Death Triangle's not going to sweep them. If you look at where the 7th match is at, I believe it's in Los Angeles in the end of January at the Kia Forum. Like, it'll be headlined by Death Triangle and the Elite. Now, what's going to be crazy to watch is how they make these matches different.
Yeah, because it could get, I don't want to say boring, because there's really nothing boring about the matches, but it could get repetitive.
I think one of them's going to end pretty quickly. I don't know which one.
Yeah, well, it was different that we saw Ray Phoenix use the hammer on this one, right?
Right.
Because he's been so reluctant to use that.
Yeah. And so then you have to think, so then what's the next narrative thing? Okay, now Pac has used the hammer. Ray has used the hammer. Penta at some point's got to use the hammer. Probably next week, I would guess. Then the Death Triangle goes up 2-0.
Yeah, so are they doing these like every Wednesday? Is that
I think so. I think the only one that they're not going to have it is January 4th, because Omega is going to be in Tokyo because he's wrestling Will Ospreay at Wrestle Kingdom.
That'll be a banger.
Yeah. So I could see a situation where Penta ends up using the hammer next. And then so that would put Death Triangle up 2-0. The third match I would have end really quickly. I'm talking about within like 2 minutes, to where Death Triangle are up 3-0 and they look like impossible to beat.
Yeah.
And then you have the Elite come back and make the heroic 4 wins in a row.
Yeah.
To get it done. And of course, House of Black is lingering out there. We anticipated perhaps we could have seen them come back at Full Gear, which didn't happen.
I think if I have one complaint about the show in general the other night, it was that there were no real big surprises, no real big returns, no big like turns in general, like face turns or heel turns. Like, I mean, we got the Swerve and Our Glory broke up, which you could kind of see coming from a mile away.
It was predictable. And even the MJF thing was, I mean, we had fucking Chase Gilmer predicted the whole thing. A lot of people predicted the whole thing.
Yeah.
It was easy to kind of see.
I think that was my one complaint about the show the other night. The show was good and it was long, you know.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna complain about it being long. I mean, it gets tiring for sure, but like at the same time, I'm like, yeah, I paid $50. Give me a bunch of matches.
Yeah, and they're all great. I mean, there's only one stinker on this card, which was Cargill and Nyla Rose.
Yeah, and that's next. And I don't think that was as much a stinker as it was. It was just it's a stacked card.
It's not up to the caliber of a pay-per-view
right
that AEW has put out.
You know, Cargill got her money's worth for, you know, in Nyla Rose, like maybe the first formidable opponent that she's been up against. Like,
right,
somebody that can go with Cargill and make it look like, oh, well, this could go the other way.
Yeah.
You know, maybe she'll get that first L. Yeah, so, I mean, we don't have to spend too much time on that one because we still got 73 other matches to get through.
I mean, at some point, you just have to think, like, when is going to be Jade's star-making moment? Hasn't happened yet.
Yeah.
Who is it that helps deliver that for her? Obviously, Athena has now turned a little bit more of a heel and vicious, but Jade is also a heel. I don't know. We're in murky waters here. We've talked about before how much crossover star potential Jade has. She was on the Breakfast Club this past week promoting AEW. You got to do something with her.
Yeah, she's out there on this Twitter feud with Bow Wow,
and maybe that's the thing.
And they showed up at one of his shows the other night and got kicked out and made this.
But
thing
that's a
about it.
babyface thing to do, right?
Yeah.
To show up. Does anybody is the AEW crowd's not going to cheer for Bow Wow?
Right.
So I don't know. Maybe they do turn Jade into a babyface.
Well, next up was Danielson versus Jericho versus Claudio versus Sammy Guevara. This one I felt like might have gone a little too long. I mean, I get that you got 4 big names up there and you got to give them some time, but I don't know. I felt like it was a tad too long. The outcome was predictable. We knew who was going to win.
Yeah, and I mean, it all sets up going forward where we're going to take this Ring of Honor title. You know, there was a lot of good spots between all these guys. We got to see Danielson and Claudio get into it a little bit. We saw Jericho and Guevara get into it. We'll see what they do coming out of it. You know, Final Battle will be the next pay-per-view. I think it's December the 10th. So, who's going to be Jericho's opponent? You know, I could see them doing Danielson again. I could see them doing, you could see Jericho and Guevara, right? I don't know if that's big money, making a lot of people buy the pay-per-view, but they got a couple weeks here.
Yeah, the Guevara and Jericho felt a little different than Danielson and Claudio, whereas Danielson and Claudio, they were like, oh, well, these guys are just competitive, and this is how this is going to go.
Yeah.
And with Jericho and Guevara, they teased it, or they played it a little more like, oh, well, this is a real turn on each other.
Yeah.
But then afterward in the interview, Jericho was like, the in-show interview, he was like, no, that's just that's you know that's his competitive nature, and that's what I taught him to do, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, yeah, because nobody's going to cheer for Sammy.
Right.
So you can't. You got to kind of at this point keep him with Chris Jericho, or else he's going to be dead in the water. There's nothing else to do
he's
with still
it. Fucking booed out of the fucking building.
Yeah. So.
So yeah, that one played out kind of how we well, not kind of, but that one played out pretty much exactly how we thought it would go. And then next up, Saraya versus Britt Baker. Got the return of Saraya, aka Paige, hasn't wrestled in over 5 years, and didn't know what to expect really out of her in-ring return.
A little rusty on her part, which is to be expected. I mean, she hasn't done it in 5 years.
Sure. I thought it got a lot better as it went on, for sure.
Yeah, it went, and I don't think this will be a one-off. I think these two women will wrestle again. I think this is a feud going forward. The one thing I will say for this pay-per-view, for even as bad as what we thought Cargill and Nyla Rose was, there were 3 distinct women's matches with 3 distinct stories. Like, that's an improvement, a much-needed improvement. And so, yeah, I thought Britt and Saraya were good. I don't think it was as good as Hayter and Toni Storm, which we'll talk about later. But like I said, I don't think this is a one-off rivalry. Like, they need to keep this thing going between the two of them. I don't know how you make it keep going. But we'll see what they come up with.
Yeah, I saw a thing afterward where it said that, Saraya she basically thanked Britt because she said Britt helped carry that match a lot,
Yeah.
And that's what you need out of, Britt's the face of that women's division. You need her to step in and do that sort of role.
Yeah.
And I've never seen a Paige match.
She was, we talked about this when she debuted. She was right before the women's revolution. So she was at the tail end of the Divas phase where it was the bra and panties matches and all that stuff. And Paige was kind of the transition into the 4 horsewomen and all that stuff. But she kind of got left behind because of injuries. And other people just became bigger stars, right? You had Sasha Banks, Charlotte Flair, Becky, Bayley. All of those, I think, became bigger stars than what Paige was. But now she's in AEW, so it's kind of a clean slate. She is the biggest star to come into that women's division. She was a much bigger star than what Ruby Soho has been. We haven't seen that huge star. We haven't seen the caliber of like a Bryan Danielson come into the women's division in AEW. So we will see what they do with her going forward. And yeah, I mean, kudos to Britt for doing what she did. That is what faces of division should be doing, helping elevate it. Other than unlike some other people, probably who have been faces of the division, a la like a CM Punk, who have probably done the exact opposite of that, which probably led to their exit. There'll be peace when you are. So, but yeah, good. I want to see this keep going forward.
So next up, Wardlow versus Samoa Joe versus Powerhouse Hobbs. This one was a little bit of a shocker for me. I say there weren't there were a couple of surprises, but not like huge surprises. You know what I'm saying? Like a huge surprise, a return of MJF, even though we kind of knew it was going to happen. But like, I didn't think they would take the belt off Wardlow this soon. Having said that, they didn't really do anything with his title run.
Right.
It was such a great build up to it, and then it seemed kind of anticlimactic.
Yeah. Although I really did like this match quite a bit. Wardlow has now become like when you were playing those wrestling games and you were a kid and you weren't trying to make it realistic, so you were just like, fuck it, I'm gonna have this dude be 6'6" and 300 pounds, but I'm gonna give him the moveset of Jeff Hardy and just do Whisper in the Winds and Swanton Bombs. Yeah. That's just real life. That's what Wardlow is. His Whisper in the Wind spot where he just ran up the ropes, that's probably better than Jeff Hardy has ever hit that thing. And Wardlow is...
Oh, man's is 300 pounds.
I mean, you keep doing that, like you will... That is a star that you can have if he has stuff like that. Powerhouse got some good stuff in, too. He still kind of got overshadowed in this match. And then Samoa Joe, obviously, is I guess he is the king of television now. I mean, he's the television Ring of Honor champ. He's the king of TNT. So we'll see. It's probably a good move to put that TNT title on somebody like a Samoa Joe. You suspect that Samoa Joe and Wardlow's feud will continue. And then where do they go from there? I guess, you could do a Wardlow versus MJF feud coming down the pike.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know if that's the right call for Wardlow.
We figure they'll get to it at some point. They
would
won't be
have
the
to.
first one they do, but maybe by summertime.
And then hopefully Samoa Joe will elevate the TNT title, have it be a little bit of cachet to it. It needs a good long champion in the way that like Gunther is doing things with the Intercontinental Championship on SmackDown. Like you need that somebody who has it for like 8 months and has a bunch of good matches and runs through a bunch of really good wrestlers to kind of elevate the legacy of it. Because it's always kind of historically been a little bit of hot potato.
Yeah.
Right? Even, I mean, it went from Brody to Cody and Darby and Guevara. I mean, Scorpio Sky. Like, the AEW's only been a company for 3 years, and it feels like we've had 27 TNT champions.
Yeah, and they didn't. It was a company for probably a good year before they brought in the belt.
Right, and you look at the AEW World Title. MJF is the 5th different champion.
Yeah.
Like, so I mean that's the difference. So it's time to kind of settle the TNT title down. Maybe Samoa Joe is the guy that keeps it, and you have a bunch of really good feuds with him. Because I mean, you can see his matchups, right? Samoa Joe versus Darby. That'd be a hell of a match.
Yeah.
Samoa Joe versus Wardlow. Again, you could run that back in a singles match. There's a lot of different ways you could go with that. Make it interesting.
Yeah, so next up was probably the one match of the night that I felt like really didn't have a place on the card, even though you got to try to get Darby in there somehow. Darby Allin and Sting versus Jeff Jarrett and Jay Lethal.
So there's a pattern here. And I don't know if I noticed it as soon as it happened. So they didn't announce that this match was going to be no DQ, no count out till like the day of. I think Darby and Sting, as long as they're a tag team, they're going to be booked on every single pay-per-view card for the sole purpose of Tony can insert them where he feels like the crowd might be dying and let Darby and Sting wrestle out into the crowd and jump off shit and all that. That's basically all this was.
Okay.
They've done the same thing now, I think, for the past 3 pay-per-views where they've just wrestled out into the crowd. Because wasn't it All Out where Sting like jumped off the...
Yeah.
So that this is going to be the
thing. Basically the top of a door or something, onto...
So this is where they're at. This is just their spot. I ain't mad at it. They keep it short. I love the Satnam Singh spot. I think they finally started nailing him where he's like, we're just going to use him in spots that really accentuate his size.
He can't sell for shit, and he can't move that well.
Yeah, so just have him catch Darby. Probably saved Darby's life because Darby undershot him off the thing, and Satnam just picked him up like a bag of potatoes anyway and chunked him off the ramp.
Yeah.
And then Jeff Jarrett, he got the guitar spot in. We talked about, I don't know why you bring Jeff Jarrett in to just beat him immediately, but that's exactly what they did. So at this point, I'm going to just stop previewing and making predictions based off, past history because
I'm just kind of hoping they quickly relegate him to he's there for more backstage stuff. You bring him in, give him a couple spots, let him get on TV a little bit. And
my whole prediction picking Lethal and Jarrett was that I thought MJF was going to be a babyface. Yeah. And so you needed heels. If MJF is going to stay a heel, you don't need any more heels. You need a lot of baby faces to go up against him. So
true. So next up, one I know you're excited about, Tony Storm versus Jamie Hayter.
Tell me what you think about this. I think this was the greatest AEW women's match that they've had. The crowd wasn't into it as much because the crowd at this point was basically exhausted.
My only other one I could think of to put up against it was that I think it was the first real big Thunder Rosa versus Britt Baker where it just got bloody as hell.
The lights out match?
Yeah.
So you could do that if you...
That's probably the other one you would put up against this one.
Exactly. So there's only 2 of them. This one was fantastic. Their chemistry was amazing. Jamie's just organic groundswell of momentum and fan support. You know, they finally pulled the trigger on it and paid off. This is something that's months in the making. We thought it probably should have happened at the last pay-per-view. I don't know where you go now with Tony, because she seemed to have gotten overshadowed by Jamie Hayter. Do they pull the swerve of all swerves and have Tony and Jamie turn heel against Britt? Because we're all expecting Britt's going to turn on Jamie Hayter, right? I mean, this is where it's coming now. Britt came out in the Jamie Hayter shirt. Britt has been multiple-time women's champion, face of the division. The logical, most predictable story is that Britt becomes jealous. She's already tried to fuck Jamie Hayter out of this title once at the last four-way. She tries to do it again. Do we see a swerve where Jamie aligns with Toni Storm and they do that to Britt to turn Britt babyface before? And then you could
I don't know.
then you could see a Britt and Saraya tag team going up against a Tony and a Jamie Hayter tag team. I'm just throwing stuff out there because you gotta now's the time you gotta start telling stories.
Right. That's interesting.
And
because then that way you can have Saraya in the ring and she doesn't have to do a ton of heavy lifting, right?
yeah, and you have Saraya and Britt. You know, Britt earns Saraya's respect. She's already naturally put her over, right? You mentioned Saraya's kind words at the press conference. You know, could it be a Jamie, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me? Like, Britt's already tried to screw her out of it once. She gonna let her do it again?
Yeah.
So,
It's
I don't
not
know.
a bad move.
Then you give Tony something to do, and
Yeah.
it's just potential. I mean, other than that, I don't know. I guess you do just pull the trigger on Jamie versus Britt.
So do you think there's a possibility that when Thunder Rosa comes back from whatever is ailing her, they've already hinted that they may take the belt off of her? Do you
I think they're
they
just
would-
going to strip her. I think they'll strip her of the title, and they'll do some kind of ceremony. And whatever kind of turn is going to happen, if it's Britt turning on Jamie, if it's Jamie turning on Britt, that will happen at this ceremony where Tony Schiavone will probably be out there, and they're crowning Jamie as the new undisputed women's world champion.
Yeah.
And then whatever story you're going to get into, you do it that way.
Interesting. So let's keep it moving. We still got War Games to get to. So one more match really, since we already covered Moxley and MJF. The Acclaimed versus Swerve in Our Glory. Saw the disillusion of Swerve in Our Glory. Kind of saw this one coming.
Yeah.
I didn't. It was interesting to me though, the way they played this one out. I thought this was pretty neat. How Keith just fucking left the ring
Yeah.
and was like, "This is all you, dog."
Yeah.
I thought that was pretty neat. I don't know that I've ever seen that. I mean, I'm sure it's happened before, but to just leave a guy in the ring that's your partner and just turn in on him, I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, that's been they've I don't know if AEW has done that before. If they have, I can't remember. But that's been a spot that I've seen before, old school wrestling wise, even up until modern day WWE stuff. This is what we saw coming. Obviously, Keith and Swerve are now going to go into a feud together, we presume. Keith Lee could be a possible good first MJF opponent.
Yeah.
Revolution is in March. You could run through a Keith and Swerve program till then. Keith is a kind of guy that I think the fans could naturally kind of get behind. Obviously, he came out of the gates red hot when he debuted at AEW.
Yeah.
So that he could take a loss at this point because you could have Swerve fuck him over again or whatever. So just putting out there, that could be a good potential first MJF big time opponent.
Yeah.
And then as far as the match, they still didn't capture the magic that they did it All Out.
No, but they were
There were good spots nonetheless. And again, this is a part the crowd was absolutely exhausted.
Yeah.
At this point, they had sat through almost 4.5 hours of wrestling.
Right.
That's a lot.
And Anthony Bowen's shoulder was kind of fucked up. It looked like after something
Yeah.
happened on Wednesday night.
Yeah. But this, the Acclaim's still hot. They're still a hot tag team. And so, we'll see where they go next. I guess the next opponent is FTR, right? That'll be next.
I mean, that's the logical choice, yeah.
Which I think FTR is currently in Japan, defending the IWGP
Yeah.
tag team titles.
So do you bring them back for Winter is Coming?
No, I think if you want to do that match, I think you hold that off till the next pay-per-view. I think will be Revolution sometime in the spring.
Yeah.
That's it. You can have Acclaim to go again. They can do Gun Club or Gun Brothers or whatever the fuck those guys are called now. There's other tag teams you can run up against them till then.
Sure. Well, we're getting a little low on time, so let's move through some of these predictions for War Games this weekend. Let me try to read my chicken scratch, and there's about 17 names to read here in the first match on the card. We got the Bloodline versus Sheamus and Butch and Ridge Holland and Drew McIntyre and Kevin Owens, who was the last of the team members, which was a little shocked because they'd kind of been playing up. Kevin Owens was injured, and they weren't sure when he was going to return. And then he comes out the other night on SmackDown.
Came out on Friday to a huge pop.
Yeah.
Huge ovation for Kevin Owens. This is going to be a hell of a match. I'm excited about Survivor Series.
This is really, to me, the only one I'm really interested in. I think AJ Styles versus Finn Balor will be good.
Yeah.
But this is the show right here.
Yeah, I mean this is the match because it has everything in it, because this is what I think coming out of this match we're going to start to see the momentum build for what Roman's WrestleMania plans are going to be. If he's going to defend the title twice, like what is anticipated, probably against The Rock and against some other opponent, we think it'll be Sami Zayn. I think you start seeing the inklings of that happen at the end of this match. Excuse me. We have seen the dissension between Jay and Sami. How does that play into this match? I still think the Bloodline's going to come out on top because they've been a group longer. So I think anytime where you have a match like this, where you have a ragtag bunch of guys going up against a group that's been solidified, you always have to go with the solidified group.
Yeah.
But
I think you still have to present them sort of as unbeatable as a group too, right? Like, I mean, like you had Sammy get beat in a match or whatever recently, but like if you got more than one of these guys, like if you got a group of these guys, you got to still kind of present them as
I just think they'll still come out with the victors, but the cracks are going to start to show.
Yeah.
Because keep in mind, after Survivor Series, I don't think there is anything in December. I don't know if there's a December premium live event. I think they might.
It's a good question.
Yeah, there could be. I don't know. Could be met, but we'll roll right into Royal Rumble and then WrestleMania. So it's going to start now at Survivor Series.
Yeah, I think that's the outcome there for the Bloodline. I don't think anybody really expects. I mean, it would be interesting. Like, I think we'll get a show out of Kevin Owens.
Oh yeah,
And
I think the War Games is not going to have a roof on it like in old school War Games. The old school NWA War Games had the damn roof was 12 feet tall, so guys would just get thrown up into the top of it.
Yeah.
I think when they had the NXT War Games matches, they took the roof off of it so guys could do jumps off the cage and stuff like that. So you'll see that happen.
So next up, you got Bianca Belair, Alexa Bliss, Asuka, Maya Yim. Is it Maya?
Mia Yim.
Mia Yim.
Yeah.
I don't know her. I might have seen one of her matches. And To Be Determined versus Damage Control, Nikki Cross and Rhea Ripley. So I hadn't put much thought into the TBD until you and I were about to record, and you think it's Becky Lynch.
I mean, yeah, we know Becky's injured. I don't know what the timeline on the recovery. I mean, she was injured at SummerSlam. So what is that? 4 months, 3 months, something like that?
Yeah, and that ended with her coming back out to help Bianca.
Right.
That night, right?
Yeah.
So maybe this is how she comes back out.
Yeah, because when she comes back, she's coming back as a babyface.
Right.
Other than that, I mean, who It could be Sasha Banks. Like, if you're not going to announce it, it has to be somebody big, right? And so the options are Sasha,
Or Charlotte.
Becky, but Charlotte was a heel when she left, right? I guess technically it could be Charlotte, but really you have those two, I think, unless it's debuting somebody. I don't know why it would be who you would debut to make a big splash like that.
Yeah, you've had nobody leave, nobody that could make a name leave AEW.
Yeah. So, yeah, it'll be one of those two, and I think Bianca and her group probably get the win here.
Yeah.
Although I wonder why they're throwing Rhea Ripley and Mia Yim into this match. Unless it's for they want a moment where Bianca and Rhea are in the ring together and they want to gauge the crowd reaction.
Yeah, maybe.
Because maybe you don't have your plan solidified for WrestleMania yet. And so the reason you want to throw Rhea Ripley in this match because you want to have her go up against Bianca, and this is a natural way to kind of do it. And so obviously if you're going to do that, you got to throw Mia Yim in it because they have their thing going on between Judgment Day and OC. And so you want the moment where everybody else is gone or they're laying down on the mat and Bianca and Rhea are staring at each other corner to corner. And if the crowd stands up on their feet and starts clapping, you go, okay, well, I guess we got our answer. This is what we'll do, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think Bianca and her group get the win here.
So next up, Ronda Rousey versus Shotzi Blackheart.
It'll be Ronda Rousey. There's nothing to talk about here.
Yeah.
Shotzi is being fed to the lambs.
Yeah.
Because they're trying to get to wherever WrestleMania is.
And then AJ Styles versus Finn Balor. This could be a good match.
These guys could steal the show.
Yeah.
It's cool that now with no Vince McMahon in charge, Michael Cole and the WWE aren't afraid to reference other stuff. So they've talked about how Finn started the Bullet Club, and they've talked about these guys' history in Japan. It just helps
build a story.
It build a story, yeah, and it helps. WWE in the past has been so insular, where it's like if it didn't happen here, it didn't happen anywhere. And now it's kind of cool to see them embrace other promotions, and Shinsuke is going over back to New Japan to have that match. So that's a big
that's
thing.
interesting. Because when I got back into this a few years ago, and they started talking about Forbidden Door and people wrestling across promotions, I was like, well, this is fucking weird to me.
Yeah,
because I grew up just thinking there was WWF, and these guys were only WWF. There was no outside, they didn't get to do anything outside of that. Or
right.
And hell, even when I got back and there was no AEW and it was just WWE, I just didn't imagine people getting to do things like that.
Yeah. So it's cool. And shout out to Michael Cole. He's been doing a lot of that on Twitter, just being in the 30 seconds before the match starts, as the guy's coming down the ramp, he just lays out the whole history of it.
Yeah.
He's so damn good, and I'm glad, we talked about it before, I'm glad that he's finally now getting his due.
Yeah.
He was obviously hamstrung by a fucking psychopath yelling in his ear 24 during the entire broadcast. So now it seems like he's able to settle into this role, and he is he's knocking it out of the park.
Yeah, and then lastly, Seth Rollins versus Bobby Lashley versus Austin Theory.
So they're doing a good job with this Austin Theory rehab. We talked about he needed something else. They're nailing it. This dude has all the potential in the world, but they have to, reposition him in the audience's mind to get them to forget that this dude was a fucking douchebag for a year and a half or whatever. Right. This also could steal the show. I mean, Austin Theory can go in the ring. Bobby Lashley is a main event level guy, and Seth Rollins is one of the 10 best wrestlers in the world. So we'll see what happens. I mean, I would suspect Rollins gets the win. You don't take the belt off Rollins at this point,
right? When
he just got it. So yeah, we'll see what happens. Again, the big thing coming out of Survivor Series is we're going to start to see the breadcrumbs leading up to WrestleMania.
So, speaking of WrestleMania, I have a question, maybe two. We've talked before about do you have Roman do two main matches, one night versus The Rock, one night versus Sami Zayn? So my question is, and this will lead to something that I saw yesterday online. It appears that Stone Cold is getting in ring shape again, right?
It would appear that way, yeah.
Who does he come back and wrestle? Obviously, you want to do it at Mania, right?
Right.
Do you do 2 matches with The Rock? Do you do The Rock and Stone Cold one night?
No, I don't think that.
Because Rock's probably not coming back for 2 matches. If he comes back for one, it'll be versus Roman Reigns.
Yeah, and you want to separate your legends, I think, going up against guys who are active on the roster.
Yeah.
You want that. Like, we've seen, you can go on Peacock and watch The Rock versus Austin.
Yeah.
Right, and get
back
better.
when they were in their prime. And
get better versions of it.
So
right?
who do you bring who do you bring Stone Cold back?
Okay, so the big speculation, the internet rumors, who knows if it's true? I guess he would maybe be healed up at this time, maybe. I don't know. The big speculation obviously is fucking CM Punk versus Stone Cold. Again,
I hadn't read that.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. Again, we want to talk about chances. That's probably at a less than 1% chance.
But if it's not Punk, who is it?
I don't know, because he did Kevin Owens last year,
and that was great.
I
mean, just the lead up to, and then the payoff of that was fucking.
He's obviously going to come back as a babyface. He's the biggest babyface probably there's ever been. So you have to do some heels. Like, I don't know. If you don't give Sammy the Roman Reigns match, do you give Sammy the fucking Stone Cold match? But I don't know if you want to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how that works.
Because Roman's opponents he's either going to do one match and it's going to be against The Rock, and that's it. It'll be one night of the pay-per-view. Or if he does the 2, one will be against The Rock, and the second one's either going to be against Cody Rhodes, you would think, right? Who is going to come back at the Rumble. Does he win it? Who knows? Or it's against Sammy. Or really, those are the only 2 I like. It's not Seth.
If Cody comes back at the Rumble, does his music hit and then he takes 17 minutes to get to the ring? Like
could be.
The next guy's music hits and Cody's still slowly walking down the ramp.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. They got some. The Stone Cold mystery opponent that'll be speculation for months. If it's even going to be, if he even wrestles. I'll just say that if you're Stone Cold and you're that age, I don't know if you're working out that hard, like throwing around sandbags and stuff outside if you're not gearing up to do a match.
Yeah.
And please, God, don't let it be against somebody else, like an old legend, because we don't need any more. We don't need the Triple H and Shawn Michaels versus fucking Undertaker from Crown Jewel where everybody look like straight dog shit, right? We don't need that. We needed to go up against a guy that can help carry the match and really have some kind of reason for Stone Cold to come back.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, once again, I apologize for there being no Twitter prompt this week. We knew we were recording early, and yesterday I was sitting in my office across the hall, and I thought I should go in there and tell Patrick to put out a Twitter prompt or a Facebook prompt. We're on Facebook now, if y'all don't know. We did that the other night, and a drunken stupor decided that if Twitter's going to burn down, then we should probably have a Facebook page. We're already on Instagram. So I thought about it in my office, and I was like, I should go over there and tell him to do that. And then for whatever reason, forgot and didn't make it over here. So there's no Twitter prompt this week, and we apologize. But you're getting the podcast early. Hopefully y'all are listening to this on your way to Thanksgiving. You're going to eat a fuck ton of turkey. Or you're listening to it Wednesday before Dynamite, since we're going to be releasing Wednesday morning. Dynamite, I think, is going to be a pretty good show.
You got to start explaining why everybody did what they did. Again, we'll see how it plays out. I'm hoping it's good. I'm hoping that this story is good with MJF because it kind of has to be. The TV ratings have kind of dipped.
Yeah,
we've talked about if there's one guy that can help bring AEW into a big time mainstream audience. It's this guy. He's already on the movie sets and everything like that. We'll see if the creative matches what this dude is capable of doing.
Yeah. Well, I think that's it for this week, unless you've got anything else.
That's it. We got a lot of stuff coming on.
Well, y'all have a good Thanksgiving. Next week when we record, we'll have 2 weeks worth of Dynamite to cover.
We have 2 weeks worth of Dynamite, so we'll have a Survivor Series
And
recap.
Survivor Series, yeah.
So it should be another jam-packed show next week.
All right, y'all check us out. Follow us on Instagram and Twitter at Alabama Slam Pod. And then just look up Alabama Slam Podcast on Facebook now. And holler at us if you got things about you think we should talk about. You don't fucking need a Twitter problem. Y'all ask us some questions, and we'll answer them on the podcast.
Yeah, we do it too.
Just add us or holler at us on Facebook, whatever. And y'all have a good one. We'll see y'all next week.
Later, guys.